there's zero chance we see a big American bank at least come in and scoop up somebody like an FTX. They wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, and they can't even if they want
to. Tomorrow is the American Thanksgiving, and we are here all getting ready to freak out and see if there is capitulation within the ape world. It seems that for a quick moment, that people were selling off some of their stuff, but it looks like some of the FUD on Twitter might be overblown. Dr. Satsuma, how are you? How have you taken the news so far?
Hey, I'm good. How are you? I was hoping we'd get through, one weekend with no shenanigans. Eat my turkey, but it didn't work out that way.
It did not. So for anyone that hasn't read the announcements, basically Horizon Labs, who is in charge of doing this ape contract, tweeted saying, ape staking update. Big thanks to the talented community devs for their helpful improvements. Bug bounty AIP delayed us a bit, so we shortened the pre-deposit period by a week to keep our original 12.12 go live. Alternative front-end sites going live, see card. And so a lot of people are saying, oh my God, like, how are they just brushing this off? Because from that quick announcement, there doesn't sound like a whole lot, but when you go and look at the card in the fourth column, it says geoblocking. Please note that apestake.io will be available to users in most countries. However, users in the following countries or regions will be geoblocked, and that's United States, Canada, North Korea, Syria, Iran, Cuba, Russia, Crimea, Donetsk, and some with an L. It's super hard to read, sorry. And we are aware that geoblocking some users in North America is inconvenient for many members of the Apecoin community. Unfortunately, in today's regulatory environment, we had no good alternative. And that's mainly the discussion that I'm wanting to have with this. It's not necessarily, hey, is this great for BAYC holders or anything else like that? It's more of the overarching, okay, we've seen time after time collections copy what Yuga and Bored Apes are doing. Now, obviously not to a T, but I would assume that a lot of them look to them and then kind of make pivots based off of this. And I think this is going to have waves across the space. But at the same time, I think it's also going to wake up a lot of people of like, hey, maybe we try to pressure our governments to give a little bit more clarity on some of the stuff, because that's where the problem is. And then obviously the whole FTX thing is another debacle. But Dr. Satsuma, what is your take on this? I know you're a project founder yourself. I know you're an ape holder, so there's probably a lot of different thoughts going on in your head, but what's the biggest thing that sticks out? We can go from there.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, just the PR, the way that this was handled, I don't think anybody can defend it. It was appalling. I mean, they have to know that tomorrow is Thanksgiving in the US and that a lot of people in the US are traveling. There's a lot of ape holders, a lot of Apecoin holders in the US. So I find it hard to believe it was accidental that they made this announcement right now. And then to top it all off, you literally have to read the fine print. It's not like they put out a tweet that said, hey, by the way, you won't be able to stake in the US and Canada. It was just you had to read those little pics. So it's not a good look.
Now, when you scroll and you go through some of the quote tweets, it gets pretty juicy. So one guy says, holy shit, the APR is going to be sick for the apes that are able to stake. Geoblocking USA is huge news that was simply buried the day before Thanksgiving. Apecoin price will crash until this is resolved. Apecoin BAYC about to go up or go down? LOL, USA geoblock because regulations. Bye-bye BAYC. I don't think this is the end of Bored Apes, Yuga, or anything like that. But what's your thoughts on them kind of having this separate entity that it feels like, where there's Apecoin in its own silo and then Yuga Labs and BAYC kind of in its own silo?
Yeah, and that's expected. That's even required for the most part by the SEC. The Apecoin, it can't be affiliated with Yuga. It's got to be its own entity. So that part doesn't bother me, and it should be run separately. It should be governed separately, because it's not supposed to be just an extension of Yuga Labs. It's supposed to be an independent entity. So I don't mind at all that they silo them, but the reality is they are incredibly intricately related. So even though they're siloing them legally, the reality is it kind of is one big organism.
So I want to talk about the aspect of the space overall, right? Because we have Yuga and BAYC, but as I mentioned before, everyone's going to copy them. So, what do you think is going to be the biggest impact for these smaller projects? Are we even going to see these smaller projects try to take on anything? Obviously, Gutter Cat Gang was one of the first ones we saw that said, "Hey, we announced we were going to do a token. We're going to wait for that one." So, how do you think this is going to affect kind of the smaller project?
I do think it's going to have a chilling effect. I don't think that's a bad thing. Launching a token now, especially if you're a US based or North American based company, it's not like it was a year or 2 years ago. There are some regulations, they're kind of shaky, they're new, there's more coming. So, unless you have a huge war chest and you're prepared to go to war to defend your token, it's kind of dicey to launch that right now, and in particular to launch staking, because when you start offering people a return on their money, now you start to look a bit like a security.
Well, I think there's some people that have the prospective within certain NFTs, and I don't want to hold this as like an overarching view, but I think there's some expectation when certain NFTs have said, "Hey, you're going to be like owning this part that's within a game, or there's going to be some kind of income being derived from it." And I mean, for this example, we can look at other side where people, I believe, have kind of the assumption that, hey, there's going to be some kind of resource material, even if it's strictly in game, you're able to get. Do you think that this is going to affect that for US customers, or do you more think that this is going to push people to really, go after the Gary Genslers and make a storm about this one before maybe they didn't have a reason to be up in arms because everything was fine, but now it's directly affecting them?
Yeah, I 100% think it's going to affect other side. If anything, other side looks a lot more like a security to me than Apecoin does. Now, obviously, I'm not a securities attorney. I'm not Gary Gensler, right? I'm not an expert in this. But if you look at what the Howey test is of what a security test, what a security isn't, other side is concerning. And Yuga, or I should say Apecoin, wouldn't have made this decision unless they had a reason. So someone somewhere along the way had to tell them you can't have staking in the US and Canada.
Yeah, being a Canadian, oh my goodness. Well, okay, so but that's the thing, right? Because you had a zinger tweet. I need to post it. Hold on, I got to go to your profile because this one was like, oh my god, hard stop. We got problems going down here. But the fact that nobody seemed to care, or maybe that's a bad assumption on our part, but we thought all the due diligence was done. Bored Apes had the need for you to KYC ahead of time, which was supposed to be the saving grace for it. But then further to that, we were, as apes, just given to that because we were holders. But if that ends up not being the case, and this stuff really does have some significant impact, what does that mean for the legal team of BAYC? Because I thought a whole bunch of other projects also use that same legal team.
That is correct. They use Fenwick, or at least they did the last time I had heard that. And I know multiple other fairly large groups use Fenwick. Again, not a lawyer. Their reputation is they're a fairly aggressive law firm in that, they'll defend things that other firms might not be comfortable with. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means that they're aggressive. But, it's just something to consider, right? If you're looking at getting into the space, if you're looking at what projects to get involved in, you do want to consider the stance that they've taken. Have they been conservative, or have they been aggressive? Because the ones that are more aggressive, you would expect them to have more problems. Now, it doesn't mean they will overcome them. I mean, Ripple is well on their way to beating the SEC, but a lot of that just depends on having a massive war chest to deploy.
Okay, so that's the other point with this is because I had Boomer, who I know is a partner with you on some of the stuff that you do, on a while ago where we talked about, okay, what is going to happen with this SEC news when it originally broke and they said, hey, we're being investigated, even though it wasn't them, but it was like a news article. And Boomer thought that, hey, it was going to be like a slap on the wrist. It's probably going to be like a hefty fine to it. And you're talking about war chests here. Let's say that all this thing is like worst case scenario across the board. Do you think that Yuga is going to have enough money to fight that? Or is the SEC and all these regulatory bodies going to say, hey, we're going to try to throw like everything at you to try to hammer down on the space as a whole?
Oh yeah, Yuga 100% has enough to fight it. The SEC, you don't necessarily go to war with the SEC unless you try to fight them. If they come to you and say, hey, we don't like what you did here and you need to correct it, and you fall on the sword and say, absolutely, yes, please, may I have another? We will pay a fine. We will correct this going forward. you don't get these career-ending, company-ending fines. The only reason Ripple has racked up the legal bills that they did is they did choose to go to war. They wanted the decision that they were a security reversed. And once you publicly declare that you've gone to war with the SEC, then you really need a lot of cash. But if you have, so like Elon Musk, for example, he does something wrong, the SEC fines him 50 million. He doesn't really care, right? He has so much money. So even if Yuga was found, I don't want to say guilty because they're not even being investigated. Even if the SEC was basically declared themselves unhappy, Yuga has plenty of money to pay the unhappiness fine and correct whatever it is without breaking them in any way. I mean, how much money did they make over the last 2 years?
I mean, and the fact that they only have the royalties set at like 2.5%, which is, I think, one of the lowest across all collections, which is kind of crazy. And I just want to point out, by the way, if there is anybody listening that feels like they want to add any extra thoughts, or if you have kind of any questions, not that I can answer it because I'm not that intelligent, but Dr. Satsuma, on the other hand, is a genius. So that's why we brought them up here. And obviously, if any of you guys want to speak, would be happy to have you up. Okay, so NFTs, crypto, the whole shebang here. I think that whatever Yuga does, it seems to send a ripple towards the space. At what point do we have someone that's bigger than Yuga that's able to kind of dictate certain things, right? Because I guess in NFT land, we're in this kind of structure of, hey, okay, we look at apes and they're kind of the top dog. If you're saying just generally, probably one of like the largest projects that seem to have the most social pull would probably be the correct wording for it. When do we see something else that's not them kind of helping to make waves? Or do you think it's just the giants like Ripple, etc., that are going to be the ones to add assistance within an NFT land?
It's going to be the big dogs. So the bottom line is Gary Gensler wants to be the attorney general one day. And in order to do that, you have to go after certain kinds of cases. You go after flashy things like Kim Kardashian. You go after slam dunk, grossly negligent things like some of the smaller NFT cases that were clear rug pulls and were always meant to be rug pulls. And then you go after the big dogs. And you don't go after anything in between. So he's building up his brand, his reputation. So those are the cases that the SEC is going to look to take on, which means it's going to continue to be the Yugas and the Ripples of the world that lead this fight.
And do you think that Yuga is the one that's well positioned here? Because he talked about the fact that Fenwick is involved with them. And I guess, is all of this stuff now just on the legal parties and it's not even on the founders, right? Because we might be sitting here thinking, yo, Gargamel and Gordon are going up against the dogs. But like realistically, it's probably not that case.
I mean, it by all means should solely be their legal team. And I don't know if it's still Fenwick, or they may also have a securities firm that they're working with, someone that specializes in that, although Fenwick certainly does that. But in this kind of situation, you don't want founders tweeting about this at all. This should 100% be the legal team. And that's what bothered me the most about the Apecoin tweet today. It's like, hey, no. Yeah, I know you're geo-locked for, reasons, but it's cool. You can use a VPN. Like, that tweet should not have gone out. That was just dumb.
Well, I think it's also funny that we've had this constant problem within the Apecoin conversation that, hey, like the comms team keeps putting out these things that people are unhappy with pretty much constantly. And I think one of the strange parts was for the Apecoin Council, or whatever the original Apecoin team was for the staking, when everybody heard who it was, we're all like, oh, that's cool. Okay. We've never seen them in any kind of community or any other fashion. And then we proceeded to have several months of people being unhappy with what was being done. And then 3 of those individuals then leaving the team entirely, causing a complete other stir. But if you're somebody in the space, or if your goal in life is to achieve something, maybe I'm wrong with this, but I feel like being on that very elusive, exclusive council for Apecoin and being the directors of that in a way is something that would be very much strive for. So do you think that the people that were originally in place for that were just trying to do that position to add that to the resume, or that they were actually wanting to be invested and make a difference?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know any of them personally, so I really can't say. And I just, full disclosure, I don't hold any Apecoin anymore. You know, I did get my Ape quite a long time ago, so I did receive it all, but I sold it when I heard about the initial SEC buzz. I can tell you the kind of people I would want to see on the council, and I wouldn't necessarily want to see people that are super active at Discord. I'd want to see people that actually have some background in finance or law, or hey, how about somebody with a PR background? That would be amazing. You know, basically, you want a team. It's just like you're assembling a football team. You want people with different skill sets in the thing you need. And being a great shit poster or being active in Discord does not qualify you to run a cryptocurrency.
You know, I absolutely love the way that you worded that. I mean, it is true though, because we're kind of accustomed to, I mean, doom scrolling on Twitter. Like, I feel like everyone here is probably guilty of that at some point over the past couple of weeks, being like, okay, what's entertaining? What's this? And it is kind of the memes or other things. But when business is needed to be done, it's definitely got to come from a different group. But I'm still shocked that there was 3 people of such a small group that said, I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm curious. Now, obviously, nobody here has the answer, but was it the fact that, you know, they knew that there was regulations coming in that they didn't want to deal with? Was it they didn't like the structure or how things were being done? Because I mean, on the surface, we see these announcements, and I think the community as a whole complains about it. Well, at the same time, maybe there's people that are on that council themselves that are like, I don't like how this is being run, but they're getting outvoiced by other individuals, and maybe it's a clique, and we all really kind of don't know. But I think one thing that's cool about this is we're all able to get together and have some conversations about that. So again, just wanted to throw it out there. If there's anybody else that wants to come up on the stage, would love to have you. But Dr. Satsuma, for some of the responses for this with the capitulation, let's talk about worst case kind of scenario here, where everyone is kind of panicking in a way. What do you think this actually does for the space as a whole? Is it this is all good? We're just weeding out the bad actors and bad things and getting that regulatory clarity in a way, or is there something else we should be looking at?
Well, this is where it gets kind of weird, right? Because outside of North America and some of Europe, crypto is still, at least from a regulatory standpoint, it's still the wild, wild west. So if you live in one of those regions, and there's a lot of money in those regions, not that much has changed for you. But in Western Europe and North America, that's not true anymore. So definitely you'll see a chilling effect in those regions where we are having regulation. Now, I think some of the things need to be regulated, like the centralized exchanges. Clearly, that hasn't gone well. But as to how much of a chilling effect that's going to have, I don't really know, because there's still a ton of money circulating in other parts of the world, like Asia, that just doesn't have that much regulation.
It's weird to think like we're all little sissies. We're only looking at ourselves for being in North America and whatnot, when there is like a whole bunch of other countries. But on that topic, do you think that there's actual genuine movement from people thinking that they might relocate? Because I made a tweet earlier and I was like, I don't know why these countries that have a budget to potentially bring in people from other countries aren't just spending it being like, yo, come to us, we're crypto friendly, we treat it as this. And I know like New Zealand is one that is kind of friendly towards the digital collectible world, but why aren't countries being more vocal of trying to get people to them?
I mean, bottom line, people are dumb. Governments are made of people. Therefore, governments are just as dumb as anybody else. And, you know, to us on this call, like that seems really obvious. Of course, they should do that. But to them, like that's really low on their to do list. It may not even cross their mind.
I feel like I want to just look into it just to see what the other options are. And I mean, for Canada, I don't know how it is in the States, but for Canada, everyone is like kind of blocked in a way. So we can't use MasterCard for crypto things. I have no idea for Visa. For bank transfers and whatnot, you're able to use like Interact transfers. But usually, if you ever go and talk to like a teller, they'll say, oh, is this for crypto? And then proceed to like say, "Oh yeah, we can't do anything," and then you talk to the manager. Hey, listen, I've done it. It's super annoying. But Satsuma, for like the U.S. where you are, how is it when you go talk to some banks?
I mean, I haven't had any really huge problems. I always use one of the larger banks, not one of the small community banks, if I'm sending money to like Coinbase or Binance, which I only use as an exchange, not as my bank, because that's what they're for. I haven't had any trouble, but I would imagine anybody that doesn't use a really big bank probably does.
That's interesting, yeah, because all major banks in Canada, I'm pretty sure, have some kind of limit on it. I've seen some people say, "Oh, this one doesn't." Well, I've seen counter arguments for other ones, but I think that it's kind of interesting, just the fact of what happens to banks as a whole. And on the Twitter space that I had on Tuesday, and we do a Twitter space on Tuesdays at 4 p.m. every week, but tonight I just thought, hey, this is kind of big news, so let's talk about it. We had the discussion where what if these banks are leveraging up and kind of thinking, hey, we're going to enter the crypto space, but we're going to potentially, buy out the FTX or someone that's FTX is a shoddy example of that, but maybe some of these minor exchanges, or really start getting into cryptocurrencies because the reports of JP Morgan doing their own crypto wallet. What if we see a complete 180 on the banks and then they turn into kind of what these major exchanges like Coinbase and Binance are? Do you think that's even in the realm of possibilities?
Nope, that is not going to happen. And again, I don't know squat about Canada, but for the US, banks are heavily regulated as to how much cash they have on hand, what they can invest it in, how much risk they can take. That's not to say they never just commit fraud, like anybody else, but for the most part, they are very tightly regulated. And crypto is just has not been approved for them in that way. I mean, we still don't even have a Bitcoin ETF, much less having banks trade crypto. When you hear about the JP Morgans or the Goldman Sachs of the world doing something with crypto, usually what they're doing is they're doing something for their large institutional investors, not for retail. So I think there's zero chance we see a big American bank at least come in and scoop up somebody like an FTX. They wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, and they can't even if they want to.
Okay, so you brought up a very interesting point there about some of the institutions, and I think early days of 2021, we're all like, "Yo, when are the institutions coming into the space?" And then it happened, and then everybody started fighting the hell out of it. And was like, "Oh my god, the founders aren't the same. This isn't the same. Why did VCs come in? Damn it, damn it, damn it!" But regulations regarding some of these institutions, I guess for like the Ontario Teachers Union pension, they actually had a huge amount of value locked within FTX because they were an investor. And now there's reports coming out that places are trying to now block institutional investors from putting pensions specifically into any sort of crypto asset, which I thought was very, very interesting. But I mean, for yourself, how do you view the institutions right now with this big news kind of being bad for Apecoin, I think, and overall in the space? Obviously, markets are down.
Yeah, I have absolutely no issue with pension funds and large institutions investing in crypto. Like the Ontario Teachers Fund, that was 0.05% of their fund. So when you look at the absolute number to any normal human, it looks like a massive amount of money, but they have something like $250 billion under management. So can they eat an FTX loss and not bat an eye? Absolutely. So for them, it's totally fine if a portion of their portfolio is invested in something super risky, as long as the majority of it is invested in reasonable things. Now, that said, all those investors, those would-be crypto investors that were watching the market, they're probably going to take a step back, right? This is not, this is going to make them uneasy, and of course, how do you custody massive amounts of crypto? That's a huge concern for them because clearly centralized exchanges aren't going to work. And do you really want like two 25-year-old guys hopped up on Red Bull using a Gnosis to move millions of dollars of crypto? So until there's some kind of solution for the UI, for the compliance, for all of that, the security for these big institutional investors, I think we're going to be kind of stuck. When you add that to the market conditions, I just don't see massive institutions coming in for a while, but they will eventually.
Well, the point of decentralization has been pushed pretty aggressively over the last few weeks, hell, even even a few days. And there was an announcement, like I don't even know if we call it an announcement, but it was found out like today that MetaMask has been tracking IP wallets, and they're collecting your IP and your ETH wallet address every time that you send a transaction. And now everybody's like, "Oh my God, hold on, wait, the MetaMask people aren't decentralized." This, that, and the other thing. I'm curious, do you have any kind of initial reactions to the fact that this decentralized and decentralized thing is kicking off, and are we ever going to get to a spot where it's like truly decentralized?
No, it'll never happen. It's a beautiful idea, But the reality is you can have security and you can have speed, um, or you can have decentralization. But those things are somewhat mutually exclusive. Do you want a super secure system where somebody is watching the people in charge, making sure that there is no fraud? How are you going to do that in a decentralized system? Um, and it's saying, well, I'm going to leave it to smart contracts. That's not enough. Like, how many coins have there been that after like a year, and all the bug bounties, they still get exploited, right? So if you really want safety and security, you need some element of centralization. And if you want fast, you also need centralization. So I think where we're going to wind up is some kind of Web 2.5, but I don't know how that looks yet.
If I had to give you 60 seconds to wrap up everything that kind of has happened over the past 48 hours regarding this Apecoin stuff, directed at everybody within the NFT land, maybe they were scared a little bit. Maybe they're like, hey, this is good. What would your kind of messaging be in that 60 seconds?
Oof, that's a tough ask. I would say, I mean, this is not unexpected. This is probably a consequence of the SEC's poking around. Staking will likely, it's still going to happen. But I think if you are in one of the countries mentioned on that list, I would not count on being able to stake.
Yeah, listen, you did it less than 60 seconds. Well, listen, I'm gonna wrap it up there. I just wanted to come on. I know there's a lot of spaces going on, and I just didn't like the quality of what was said. Dr. Satsuma said, "Yo, I'm down to come on the space, and I wanted to bring the knowledge to you guys." And I hope you found something valuable out of this conversation. We do have this recorded, so if you're wanting to go back and listen to some of the parts earlier, all of it was really, really good. Obviously, it's Thanksgiving weekend or day, kind of in like the next 3 minutes ish. So go enjoy time with your family. Appreciate you guys coming out. And Dr. Satsuma, thanks so much for giving us your time.
Anytime.